Hello everyone, and welcome to the Henchman's Memoirs. This is our 5e Dark Souls of Drakkenheim campaign recap. And when we last left off, I left out something very important from the last recap, and I just wanted to go over it with you guys. Nexel's player had an excellent moment of in-character role-playing when they were on the second floor there of Schloss Mordenheim, and they came across this sort of cabinet that had been filled up with flesh sort of samples that somebody was going to Buffalo Bill style make into a flesh suit. And Nexel's player took a moment to create this really creepy scene where he was kind of looking at these flesh samples, these skin samples, and touching his own face, which he's like a half tiefling, half hag blighted sort of monstrosity himself. And his character described him touching his own face, where he had like these scales and these weird kind of growths, and then starting to reach out towards one of the skin samples. And one of the other characters is like, "Hey, are you all right?" And he snatches his hand back, and they went on with the scene. If he didn't already have inspiration at that point, which he did, I definitely would have given him heroic inspiration for that excellent scene. It even gave me the chills a little bit. So when we last left off, they were here on the second floor of Schloss Mordenheim, and they had investigated this area. This is where they got those. They got a gun that had been made for the Jaegers out of my Bloodborne supplement that backed on Kickstarter, and I'm waiting to get the physical copy. And they had fought a couple of mechanical guards right here. So at the start of this session, they started to come down and explore this area. And right here, they came across one of these lightning walls that I've picked up from the Dishonored game. And so they realized this thing shoots about 30 feet. Anything that moves or comes into the area. Nexel tried sending his mage hand down there, but since it wasn't a creature, it didn't shoot at that. Unfortunately, the mage hand wasn't strong enough to pull the plug out of this thing. And so the party started trying to figure out a way past this thing. Nexel started shooting it with his Eldritch Blasts. Unfortunately, it has hardness 10. I don't know if we even use the hardness system anymore in 5th edition, but to me that's basically the damage reduction of a structure or an object or something like that. So you have to do 10 points of damage. The 11th point of damage is kind of the first point of actual damage that gets through, kind of thing. So he started shooting his Eldritch Blasts down there. He realized that wasn't going to really work. They didn't do enough damage. Although if he got a critical hit, he stood a chance to do some damage. So he was trying with that. They were getting a little frustrated, so they said, well, let's look around the rest of the floor and see if we can find anything. Unfortunately, there's really nothing to find. This was sort of the ladies' sort of, not a bathroom, but just a little room for them to get together and do makeup and talk about girl stuff. This just overlooked the main dining room, was just kind of a little gallery. And this overlooked the outside and was just another sort of trophy room. So stymied, they came back here. They've got a wall here. They've got this big gate that they're convinced leads to the vault, which is what they're looking for, where hopefully the meteoric iron is. And they didn't want to mess with the elevator just yet. They wanted to clear this floor first. So they came back here. Nexel tries shooting a chromatic orb at it and burns it a little bit. Pietor leans around him with his rifle and shoots at it, but I can't remember if he did enough damage to get through the hardness. They're sort of stymied, trying to figure out exactly how they're going to take this thing down. And finally, our fey friend, Thaddeus, the druid, just turns into a bear and goes down there and just starts chomping on this thing to finally disable the lightning wall. He took some lightning damage, but I think he made his first save. So he was all right. They come down here and they come into what's basically the master bedroom. So this room, like many other rooms in Schloss Mordenheim, has some demonstrations of different sort of technology that the artificers were working on. I get all this from PhD&D's Lamortia adventure video. I'll try to link that in the comments. So they get in here, and there's a primitive photography setup to take pictures and so forth, which he had this set up in his bedroom, so you can tell where this was going to go. But as Atticus started looking through some of the pictures that were laying there, some of the plates that had been developed, he quickly noticed that kind of in the shadows, you could just barely make out. In the first couple pictures, it looked kind of like a smudge that almost looked like a human face. But then as he started to go through more and more of the pictures, he could more clearly see this sort of sinister figure in this out-of-date noble's attire, kind of just watching from the shadows as these portraits were being taken and so forth. So I don't use the stress mechanic for this game that I use in my other Ravenloft games, but I definitely would have had him roll sort of a fear check if that mechanic had been in play in this game. So he decided, this is probably valuable. He threw that whole thing in his portable hole, and Nexel was looking around and found the key that goes to this gate. So they adjourned, they get back up here. It's this sort of X-shaped, plus-shaped key, very elaborate. And he had to figure out how it went in there, and I did the thing where it's like a USB, where the first way you put it in is right, but it won't turn, and you have to try every other combination, and then you go back to the first way that you put it in, and now all of a sudden it works. So, of course, that's how they got past this. And they came out into this area. This was a little, sort of had some armors and some trophies of war and some medals and stuff that the Mordenheim family had gained over the years. And then they came into this area. Now there's a stairway, a narrow sort of circular iron stair that goes up. Thaddeus was in bear form, so he knew he wasn't going to be able to get up there, so they wanted to go downstairs and check out this area. And this is basically the surgery area / vivisection area. I had in mind those pictures you've probably seen from the 16th, 17th, 18th century, where they would do early surgery, and it was basically like a college classroom. You had all these guys in suits kind of sitting in bleachers almost, watching the procedure take place. So that's definitely what's supposed to be going on here. You can watch from this area, or you can go downstairs and be in the actual chamber where it's taking place. I also, just from Bloodborne and some other research I've done, I'm under the impression that in the early Victorian era, blood transfusions was just a really popular medical treatment for just about everything. They thought for a while that blood transfusions were going to be just the panacea of the modern age. They didn't even know about blood types yet, but they were just like, concussion, blood transfusion. Hammer toe, blood transfusion. Eczema, here you go. So I had these elaborate pumps and devices for various kinds of blood transfusions between different creatures. But also in here, I had, from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, I had a brain in a jar. And in fact, this was the brain of none other than Victor Mordenheim himself, in a jar down here, preserved for decades, and waiting for an opportunity to dominate someone so that he could get a body and get out of this terrible disembodied state that he's in. So he immediately starts off, the party starts coming down this staircase, and he immediately starts off by trying to dominate them, use compulsion to split them up and try to get control of somebody. And right off the bat, my party was rolling rocks on these saving throws. Only Pietor was forced to sort of move away, and Nexel goes ahead, Thaddeus goes ahead and casts heat metal on the fittings on the jar, so he's starting to boil the brain in the jar. And so now the brain in the jar telepathically reaches out to Atticus, who he knows is an artificer and figures, maybe this is sort of a like-minded individual. And I had been thinking the day before how I hadn't pulled out my Thurston Howell the Third voice in quite some time, so I went ahead and gave him the annoying Thurston Howell the Third voice. He said, "Tell me, chap, can't we be reasonable about this? I mean, we're two reasonable men of science and education. Surely we can talk about this. Listen, I know that I launched off things with the hostilities, but If you'll agree to help me get into a body that no one is using at the moment, I have actually some important information that could probably help you. We could mutually help one another. So Atticus decided to call off his attack gnome for just a few minutes and talk to this guy. They were reminded that actually there was a body in the basement down here that had gentle repose cast on it, and literally was a body that was in good shape and no one was using. So they agreed that they would go ahead and try to put him in that body if they could, if he actually proved helpful. So this is when he told them that he knew he could sense psychically that upstairs, so there's no map for the third floor, but upstairs, a powerful psychic was actually in the building and was moving around upstairs somewhere, and that if they expected to be able to confront this psychic, they were probably going to need his help. So a deal was struck, and old Pietor picks up the brain in the vat under his arm. I gave the stat block to Peter's player, and they went ahead up this staircase, and they went on up to the third floor. So when they get up here to the third floor, they smell that terrible smell that they detected in the basement, and they would have detected in the elevator if they'd ever gone inside. And the elevator comes out up here, and in this room, not only are there a couple of those clockwork soldiers that have been completely destroyed, but they encounter these weird looking moon beast critters. I think there was one dead in here, and maybe a dead intellect devourer in the room as well. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, henchman, what stats are you using for the moon beast? Are you using the official Sandy Peterson's Cthulhu Mythos stats for moon beast or moon beast priest? Ha! Ha! No, he's not the boss of me. Of course, I'm using Matt Colville's Flea Mortals. I'm using the old hulking brain. I don't care if the mini matches the stats. I mean, come on. I'm a free-range DM here. Nobody's going to hold me back. So they encounter these things dead in here and have a minute to look around and think, oh, this looks troubling. And then they come down this hallway into this next area, and here's where it starts to get super fun, because down here are two hulking brains, or moon beasts as they know them, and a couple more intellect devourers, and the fight was on. So I had a lot of fun running these things out of Flea Mortals. They get 4 attacks, and each and every attack turns into a grapple that also restrains you, which is just fantastic. They come in here, and right away, Pietor looked at the stat block for the brain in a jar and is like, Psychic Blast! And interestingly, the hulking brain, Moon Beast, has psionic immunity. So he was like, terribly sorry about that, chap. I really thought that would do him in. So instead, Pietor goes running in there. Atticus comes in and starts fighting. And of course, the spellcasters are trying to, do what they can do from here. Pietor did pretty well for himself. They cleaned these guys up. I was just using minion stats for them, so they didn't really factor into this battle very much. Pietor, as usual, using his monk abilities and so forth, was cleaning up pretty well. I think he might have stunned one of the moon beasts. But poor Atticus, he ended up getting grappled and taking quite a bit of damage. These things were pretty tough. So the party, I think he turned into a bear again and managed to drop this one. And that happened without me noticing here in the stat block that they have this dying psychic scream. When the brain drops to 0 hit points, you must make a DC 16 wisdom saving throw or take 6d6 psychic damage. 6, the letter D, 6 psychic damage. So That didn't happen when this guy died, but when this fellow over here finally got dropped. So what happened was, I think Atticus was down to maybe, he was hurt, and he was grappled, and he couldn't seem to get out of the grapple. So over comes Pietor. Since old Victor Mordenheim has let him down a couple times, he led with his own attacks, and he did quite a bit of damage with his kung fu kicking and punching. This guy was down to like 7 hit points, and Thurston Howell here hit him with a chill touch spell and actually was able to drop him. And he's like, hurrah! You know, but as he goes down, he unleashes this psychic scream that I think put Atticus down to a single hit point. And actually, I should have made it so that Mordenheim could shield Pietor partially from that damage. But the situation the party finds themselves in now is, okay, they took care of these guys. That was a tough fight. There's a door up here that leads to the vault itself, and they can hear something going on in there. So they're realizing, oh, this wasn't the final fight. There's actually another more finaler fight in the next room, and we've used up most of our spell slots and a bunch of our healing, and Atticus has 1 hit point, and Pietor's out of key points and so forth. And so the party is now really debating, can they press on and face whatever's inside the vault, or do they need to retreat? They know if they retreat, whoever's in there could get away with the meteoric iron, which is the whole point of this entire encounter. And that's when one of the players said something that just really put me back on my heels. He basically said, well, surely, the DM has carefully crafted this encounter, carefully crafted this dungeon so that characters of our level could deal with it. I'd like to read to you from the Drakkenheim book itself. Drakkenheim is a dangerous place. Not every encounter is fairly balanced in a level-appropriate manner. Deadly threats lurk down every street, and many scenarios intentionally stack the odds against the player characters. They must use cunning, ingenuity, and teamwork to survive, and seek the aid of factions to accomplish their goals. So, I don't know if those words necessarily, cunning, ingenuity, and especially teamwork, if those words accurately describe my particular group of players. I love them to death, but I'm really concerned about exactly what's going to happen next time. If you want to hear the continuation of this story, give us a like on this video, maybe subscribe so that next time when we release the possible TPK episode of the Dark Souls of Drakkenheim, you'll be here with us. Thanks.